Hi, everyone. Once more, we are doing something different. I'm very excited to be joined by one of the creators working at Ghost Machine on The Rocketfellers. I am joined today by Francis Manapul, who some of you may know from his extensive works at DC and beyond. I personally have a soft spot for some of the Witchblade stuff, and I want to bring him on. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Unfortunately, my better half is unable to join us because of his potato internet, I guess.
Yeah, we've been working for a while trying to get it working so we
Yeah.
could get everybody on. If he appears, we shall bring him in, but we still have a lot to discuss. So, when it
Sure.
comes to the Rockefellers, what was the genesis behind that idea and the concept?
So a lot of it came from the fact that, if you've been following my career, after the Flash, after working on the Flash with Jeff Johns and Adventure
Hmm.
Comics, I started uh, skewing my career to where I would do one, um, I guess, what do you call it, light-hearted story, and then I would go dark, right? So I would
Mhm.
always alternate light, dark, right? So after the Flash, what's the darkest thing than the Dark Knight, right? So that's why I jumped over to Detective, right? And then after that, I jumped over to Trinity, which was, it was very much focused on family. At the time, I had just become a father, and that was very much at the top of my mind. And then after that, I worked on some stuff with Scott that were, if you're familiar with Scott Snyder stuff, that they
Mhm.
can be pretty dark, right? you know, and and that while I enjoy doing that, it allows me to explore a different aspect of my art and do different things with textures and lighting. I've always felt that where I was most comfortable is something that was a little bit more, I guess, subtle and something that really brought back the same emotions that my work with Jeff on, say, Adventure Comics. There's something about that, and when the first, I guess, rumblings of this thing called Ghost Machine started coming about, I just started talking to Peter. We had just, you know, I guess, reestablished our friendship about a year before because we were in the trenches in the bat office, right? So that's where we met each other. Yeah. So basically, we just started talking, and I was telling Pete, like, hey, what do you think about doing a story that focuses on family? Because I think we have the ability to look at it from different perspectives. Me being a father of young kids, and him being a father of a son who's entering adulthood. We're able to really approach parenthood and life from multiple angles and different perspectives, right? And I just felt like that was something that we could write with a lot of, I guess, heart. Something that was very much meaningful to where we are, right? And I realized how dumb that sounds, because this is something that will be a part of our lives forever, right? Once you become a parent, that's just part of it, right? So it'll be, and it just felt like the Rockefellers was the right outlet for us to be able to write stories that were very much top of mind and top of heart.
So, how collaborative was the process?
Well, the thing is, I'm co-writing the book with
Hmm.
with Peter,
Yeah.
right? So by virtue of that, it has to be collaborative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's been up to Toronto quite a few times, and he would spend time here in the studio with me, and we
Hmm.
would break down the stories, right? And it
Hmm.
it felt, to me, it felt very similar to the way Brian Buccellato and I wrote The Flash together, right?
Hmm.
And honestly, ever since writing on The Flash, it's been difficult for me to not be involved in that aspect of it, right? I
Hmm.
always felt like expanding the 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 part of the process always made one aspect better. I felt like writing made me a better penciler because I felt like I was more, it was more in the front of my mind, like layouts and
Hmm.
compositions, stuff like that. And the same thing as like when I started inking my work or when I started coloring my work, right? I wouldn't say I'm particularly good at each element, but together it's almost like I'm competent at my job, you know. And I think that's it. So much of it has to do with like kind of ownership and investment, right?
Mhm.
I find it difficult to be invested unless it is a collaborative process, and hey, if you watch YouTube, I literally just put out a video on Pete and I collaborating together as we were writing the Rockefellers.
Mhm.
Link down below, maybe.
I will definitely put the link down below.
Yeah, no. The thing is that I think the best comics is really deeply rooted in collaboration, right? As in your field and in your past work, right? Whenever you're going on a creative endeavor together, it's always better when you are seeing eye to eye, right?
Mhm.
Or at the very least, even if you don't see eye to eye, you both have the same goals, right? You both have the same sentiments, right? And the same
Mhm.
at the core, right? At the core of who you are as a person, as a writer, as an artist, there's overlaps, right? And it's okay to divert routes to where you're going every now and then, but that core belief that you both have is kind of what drives it together. And it's kind of, you know, it makes it easier to understand when you disagree on something, when you understand what the goals are, because you understand that that person isn't trying to speak
Derail
louder than
anything or
you.
like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You both have the same goal, so then you start asking, okay, well, why would you want to do it this way, right? You
Mhm.
start asking the right questions, because if you know that the answer is supposed to lead to the same place, but you're not quite sure why your collaborator wants to do it a certain way, you know it just helps you get a greater understanding of communicating with each other. And I think that's the key, right? And
Mhm.
honestly, so much of collaboration is literally me and Pete just hanging out. Like, if you have you ever seen like that Jerry Seinfeld show, Comedians and Coffee?
Mhm.
Honestly, like, so much of Pete being here was that, like us sitting here working, working on the whiteboard, plotting out the story, but at the same time, the time together was really the value, right? Because one of the things that we were talking about is that while we could collaborate over Zoom or stuff like
Mhm.
that, the best ideas come when we're just sitting around each other and then there's silence, you know,
Mhm.
and then you're kind of like, hey, what about this, you know? And you kind of have to be vulnerable when you're collaborating, because you have to understand that it's okay to give out bad ideas, because some of the best ideas come from just simply blurting out the most ridiculous idea, and then as you begin to like dissect that, something like brilliant comes out of it, because you start working
Mhm.
together, right? And that's where that collaboration really shines, right? Because you
Mhm.
allow yourself to explore the ridiculous and get it to the point of something that is incredible, you know.
Mhm. Did you find that because you 2 are at those different stages with the family dynamics that
Yeah.
that impacted some of the ways your ideas bounced off of each other?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's certain aspects in a lot of ways. It's interesting that we're telling a story about a family from the future, and them knowing what's about to happen, because through Pete, I'm able to see where parenthood is going.
Mhm.
Where the kids will go, what they'll be like. And when Pete was here, he stayed in my house, and he could see that I was very much in the thick of things. Kids running around. One kid is potty training, one kid is going to school, right? So there's a different level of involvement with what's
Mhm.
currently happening, right? And I think it just allows for a much more diverse perspective, right?
Mhm.
I think there's probably there's probably a sense of nostalgia of what it was like, when his son was younger, and then for me, there's this sense of seeing what's ahead, right? And
Mhm.
being a parent yourself, I remember one of the things that people keep telling me, like, oh, things go fast,
Yeah.
and because I've been told that so many times, at no point have I ever felt that things were going slow. So sometimes I'm nostalgic over things that haven't happened yet, right? So
Yeah.
it's almost like it's almost like the
You
flash
can
speed mind thing
you can
that
see
we
them
did.
coming, and, like, you're
I
already sad for
Yeah,
them being over, and they haven't happened yet.
yes, exactly. I can see. Sometimes I feel like those moments I play it out in my head, and I'm just like, oh my God, like I'm already like getting choked up over something that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Nostalgic over the future, right?
Yeah, there
So
needs to be a
it's
word for that. We need to invent a word for that feeling because I don't think we have one as of yet.
we'll say it's called the Rockefeller syndrome.
There, we've coined it right here.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. There you go.
This book has a lot of characters in it. How do you find balancing all of them?
Difficult because uh, before working on this, I was like, I am never going to work on a team book. Well, I'll work
Mhm.
on a family book. And I realized, oh crap, this family book is essentially a team book. Yeah. It's, luckily it's interesting because they all are wearing the same kind of uniform. And a lot of the things I focus on is mannerisms and the gestures of their body, right? Certain things that are developing throughout the issues as we're diving into the stories, right?
Mhm.
Certain ticks that each characters have, like the way someone's posture is, and even like I realized I drew it in the first issue where I think at the time I don't remember what it was. I was watching some sort of basketball documentary, and you know how Michael Jordan's always sticking his tongue out, and sometimes
Mhm.
kids are kind of doing this like with their tongue,
Mhm.
right? So I drew that, and then I never thought that I would do it again, and then I realized in a later issue when he was fiddling with something, I'm like, oh well, maybe that's what he does when he fiddles, is that he kind of does that, right?
Mhm.
So certain characteristics are we're discovering them as we're going on the journey with the characters of writing them, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's the fun part is that each character has such a unique personality and they bring something so different to the table, and the more pages that we write, the more pages that we draw, that they're growing, they're becoming a fully realized human being, even though
Mhm.
they're fictional. A lot of it is through their mannerisms and characteristics, and sometimes the designs kind of become an afterthought. It has more to do with what's the vibe of the character, right?
Mhm.
What do they represent? How can I express who the character is just based on how their room looks or what they're doing when they're by themselves, right?
Mhm.
So,
In the process of that, have you developed a favorite?
it changes. Like sometimes I'm like, you know, yeah, Roland's my favorite. He's the dad, right? And
Mhm.
then there would be moments where, Rodney, the grandpa, is like, this old veteran who is still so much more physically capable than everybody else. And here he is in the present, and he has to pretend that he's not as strong as he is.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, he's showing off doing like pull-ups, right, to the
Mhm.
other senior citizens. And then there would be moments where I look at Rachel and the future that she was supposed to have before having to come back to the past, and you start kind of thinking about, you know, everybody has had uh, missed opportunities, right? Things that they thought their life was going to go a certain way, and it goes in a different direction, right? That's something that is very relatable, right?
Mhm.
And you're kind of thrust into this sense of responsibility of that overtakes the things that perhaps you may have been dreaming of when you were as an individual than a parent, right?
Mhm.
And then there are times where I'm like, Richie would get into these hijinks with his high school friends, and it reminds me of that. It reminds me of being there, right? And then Ray reminds me a lot of my daughters, right? She's got like a missing tooth, because my daughter started, her baby teeth started falling
Yeah.
out, right? And then the grandma being so strong because I grew up in very much a matriarchal family, right? So to me, it was hard for me not to portray the characters in that way, right? So much of it is really just a reflection of the people that we know and in our lives, right? So it's really difficult to pick a character. I
Mhm.
feel like the favorite is whoever I'm working on at that moment, right?
Mhm.
It changes, you know.
So you have that aspect of it with the characters and the family dynamics. But what about crafting the future? Because we haven't seen so much of that yet. I've been lucky enough to read the first issue, and
Yeah.
I know we spent a little bit of time there, but not a lot. So how was it developing a 25th century for them to come from?
So that, we're gonna open those doors, I think, in issue 7, right?
Hmm.
Mostly we're gonna stay currently mostly in the present, right? Because we want to really show the contrast of who this family is and how the strange environment really
Hmm.
affects them, right? But one of the things I started looking at, my previous work before this was on this book called Clear, which was also set in the future. And it was very much like this dystopian, neo noir look, kind of has that that Roger Robert Deakins or Rogers Deakins, that the guy who did a lot of the cinematography on Blade Runner, right? So
Okay.
so it has that vibe, right? And I knew that this couldn't be that, because we didn't want them to leave a future that, oh well, that's depressing anyways. We
Yeah.
wanted them to leave a place that's fantastic that you wouldn't want to leave. And I started looking into this. Have you ever heard of the term solar punk?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the opposite of cyberpunk, where nature is so integrated with technology, and it's almost has this utopian vibe, right?
Hmm.
So I just realized I kind of spoiled what issue 7 will look like, but yeah, that's effectively the vibe of the 25th century, is this place that has achieved some sort of unity with technology and nature, right? And that will
Hmm.
play into it more than just the environment, right? It will play, the whole integration of nature and technology very much encompasses more than just the environment. It will encompass the I don't want to say anymore. But anyway, solar
Hmm.
punk,
Yes.
positive vibes in the future. That's the look.
Was that your like what was your favorite thing to design for the Rockefellers?
Um, I'll be honest. I'm not a strong designer. I'm not somebody who does a bunch of like turnarounds before I draw the books. I remember when I worked on issue 1, I told people, I'm like, hey, just so you know, I don't do that. I don't do turnarounds. I want to like live with the characters for a bit and see what functions well in a panel to panel way,
Mhm.
right? So most of the time, while I do have scribbles on the side margins, it's I need to see the characters within the panels and within the story to see what works well for that, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of my design work is discovered through that, and like with regards to my favorite, I mean, their spacesuit was pretty fun to draw. But I'll be honest, a lot of my favorite things is like thinking of like new hairstyles for them to have. Like in
Mhm.
in the second issue, I drew this guy with like the most like luscious Kentucky waterfalls mullet, and I just love it. I love it. And it's things like that. I love designing Rex, because I essentially drew him after my dog. Yeah, a lot of it is really, if Pete were here, he would say otherwise. Francis is saying he does it on the fly and he wings it, and it's not necessarily untrue, but I just feel like I need the story to unfold before I really get into that. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's weird. Designing stuff isn't really something that is at the front of mind for me. And I
Mhm.
look. I had a really difficult time designing the villain, and that one I really labored over. I find that now that I'm hitting a groove, I think it looks cool. I don't know. I mean, the response seemed to be pretty positive,
Mhm.
but to me, designing feels like, when you put on some clothes and you think you look cool, and
Mhm.
you're kind of like, I don't know if this just makes me look like I'm trying too hard, right?
Mhm.
Rather than seeing what's comfortable with the things that you like to do. And I think that's kind of my approach to design is, it's what clothes would I wear on a daily basis where I'm not trying to impress somebody. right?
Mhm.
What feels comfortable for the story and what feels comfortable for me. So I don't know. It's. I'm not exactly answering the question because I'm saying, yeah, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I'm
No,
just
it makes
figuring it out.
sense because it's more like getting the characters into, like you were saying earlier, their vibe, and then their
Yeah.
design kind of flows from that rather than design forward, kind of.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the only thing that I made a really concerted effort is that since I knew the opening scene was going to be them running over ice, I wanted them to stand out and have very warm and inviting colors, right?
Mhm.
That was the one. I didn't even think about the look or the design. I just knew that the colors I wanted
The
the
contrast.
family to, yeah, exactly the contrast, and with them having warmer colors, the fall vibes, right? I
Mhm.
think it also makes them much more uh attractive and kind of homey and cozy to the readers,
Mhm.
because and in contrast, the villain is very cold. It's blues and purples and steel, right?
Mhm.
Something that feels uncomfortable,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's honestly that's one of the things that I love about making comics is that you realize how important every aspect of the job is and how much that
Yeah.
contributes to the story, right? Like it's not just the writing, it's the layouts, it's the pencils, the inks, and it's the colors. It all like works together to create like a story, right? Like when I started coloring my work, I'm like, there's more story elements that you can add once you start coloring. That became a huge aspect of the design, I guess. So
Do you like having like that level of control over everything? Like just doing all like through all the art like that?
uh I do and I don't. I don't because I feel like I have like three full-time jobs. But I also do because it feels like there's a sense of ownership. I don't think I'm the best inker. I think there are other inkers that could ink my work in a much more polished way. Brad Anderson, who's like one of the best colorists in the industry, could make my stuff sing. But I've always felt like like the mistakes that we all have kind of adds to the overall aesthetic of an image.
Mhm.
It's the same thing as how like some of your favorite perhaps actors uh aren't the ones with the most perfect face. It's the ones that have something a little bit different,
Mhm.
that so I've always felt like look, it's what I say to make myself feel better, and that I think the mistakes that I do add to the overall uniqueness of the work, right? And I just
Mhm.
kind of felt like somebody else, even though if they did a better job than I do, sometimes perhaps I feel like there's a certain aspect of my voice that isn't uh being heard, I guess. So it's
Mhm.
it's less about control and more about being seen and understood, I think.
Mhm.
Like what my intents are. And I think that's
Mhm.
kind of the basis of where that comes from. So
No, that makes sense. I
yeah.
wanted to ask from when I heard the concept, why time travel? What drew you to the time travel aspect?
Well, I mean, I did it a lot on the Flash.
Yes.
um it's interesting, right? Because on one hand, I think the idea that in the future, under witness protection program, instead of hiding like in Arizona or something, that you're just hiding in a completely different time, right? I
Mhm.
think that concept is really intriguing and it opens up a lot of doors, right? I think if you think about it, that's a very expansive idea. That means the Rockefellers aren't the only ones hiding throughout time. There are others. There's other people
Mhm.
under witness protection program, but that's the backdrop that we're choosing to uh, showcase this family, right? And one of the things that really plays into it is that as a family, as a son, as a daughter, as a father, as a mother, there's kind of this I don't want to say this sense of there's never enough time, right? But it always, because obviously we all have a finite time on this planet, but there's this, I don't know, there's this subconscious feeling that if you could travel throughout time, you could experience different aspects of a
Mm-hmm.
person's life, or a world, or a planet, or a city's evolution, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think a part of it has to do with like, what's the greatest road trip a family could ever take? What about throughout time? you know and I think
Mm-hmm.
that really excites Pete and I as an idea, right? It's they could literally see where families were, because in the time that they're in, they're living very disconnected lives, and guess what, that's more or less what it's like now, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's on their phone, everyone's on this, but to them, being here feels like going out into the woods and being disconnected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this sense of I guess relevance. There's this thing where the sentiment is forever. You know what I mean? There's certain aspects of a feeling and experiences that families go through
Mm-hmm.
that is relatable, whether you're in the 1930s or whether you're in 3025,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's certain aspects of life that overlaps, and I think this is a really great way to showcase how the family unit and the relationships and bonds that they form really transcend throughout time, right? And that's a common ground that they're able to relate to with people of this era, even though they come from a completely different time, a different culture, a different society, but
Mm-hmm.
there's this we hope that a connection that the readers will understand, because regardless of whether they're from the 25th century or from today,
Mm-hmm.
there's an overlap, right?
Is that why you picked 2024 and not some like slightly further back point in time, like the 90s or something like that?
Yeah, and also, I don't want to have to do research on what I don't want to draw kids in Hauser pants like what we used to wear.
You don't want
Well,
to have the
that's back.
backwards hat?
That's back now. That's
I
back now.
know.
You know. So it's yeah. I think uh, there's something to be said about just putting things at the current time that makes it. I think it drives it home even further, right? Because then we're not asking the reader to think of the future and also to think of the past, right? We're just asking them to think about the future, and they'll subconsciously already contrast it to the things that they're experiencing today.
Mhm. Do you find that because you've done both, you've done like the dark future and then the more utopian style future, do you find that that really alters kind of, I guess, how you can approach the conflict in the present time?
It's interesting because one of the things that's great about science fiction is, since I'm not a scientist, I can really
Mhm.
delve into the speculation of where technology goes, where society goes, where this goes, right?
Mhm.
And I think even it's it's trying to tap into the concerns of people today, and the sentiment of how people feel about certain technology, and figuring out where is that going to be by the 25th century, right?
Mhm.
Is it going to be something that nobody really bats an eye about anymore because it's the norm, or is it something that was detrimental, or was it something that was beneficial? And I think it's taking this balanced approach, and I think that's one of the more difficult things about it, that Pete and I
Mhm.
really spoke a lot about at length, with hey, what is this future like? What happens to this technology? Where does it go? What does it mean? What does it mean to the family unit, right? Because everything kind of goes back to that, right?
Mhm.
Everything is framed around, here's the family. What does the family need in order to come together, and what can we introduce to their society that picks away at those core values and pulls them apart, right?
Mhm.
So everything kind of was coming down to um, finding the blend between speculating on science, but then also keeping it in line with what the themes of the books are.
Because it sounds like the future you're building towards, at least on the surface, has a lot more of those like positive elements in terms
Yeah,
of like slightly more hopeful aspects. Do you
yeah.
find that that's a bit more difficult to extrapolate? Because a lot of times science fiction goes for like, it's awful, we're doomed. Everything we have now, terrible. So,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I wouldn't say it's difficult because I mean, all you kind of have to do is I'm a parent of young kids. All I need to do is ask them the things that they
yeah.
like, right? And they approach things with such optimism
Hmm.
and excitement, right? That to me, it's not difficult, right? Writing stuff that's depressing, that's difficult, right? Because then you start thinking, oh man, why don't I just quit now, right? You know,
Hmm.
it's I think I you know what it is. I think the dystopian stuff lends itself well to a very visually arresting image, because when you think of like Planet of the Apes or something, right? And you see like the Statue of Liberty like
Yeah.
all crumbled up, like that's such a cool and powerful image, right? And it feels like such a warning shot, as like in the YouTube landscape, some of the most attractive titles are things that tap into people's fears and negativity because
Yes.
they click on it because either they want to avoid this catastrophe that's happening, or they want to at least be knowledgeable that it's happening, right? And it's a little bit more difficult to get people attracted to things that are positive, right? Because
Hmm.
there's no immediate warning, there's no sense of immediacy, right? They think, yeah, that's fine, no big deal. But if I
Hmm.
said, if I said, your art and career will be over if you don't do this,
Yeah.
you know, click through rate through the roof, But if you wrote, this thing really changed the way that I looked at art. eh,
Hmm.
it's not that interesting. It's that sounds like a fluff piece I think at the end of the day, we all want like a something hopeful and positive. I think the the natural inclination is for the dark stuff. And you know, one of the things that is like a perennial read for me that I feel like I read every year is like All Star Superman.
Hmm.
There's such a sense of hopefulness to it that is just incredible. And you have to keep in mind that at the time that that book came out, it was really subverting everything else
Hmm.
within the books at that time, because everything was very dark. Everything was, the ultimates, characters that were more like anti-heroes and this and that, right? And
Hmm.
while I think that's cool as well, I was a kid once too, and I thought
Yeah.
that was badass, right? But I think I think the things that last are the things that are positive, and I think the things that are negative have an immediate high of today. It gives you that endorphin rush, right?
Hmm.
And I think things that are positive, it's kind of about being patient and understanding that it's a story that may not blow the roofs off because it doesn't feel like a massive trigger warning. It's more something that hopefully stories that you'll come back to every year whenever you need a sense of realigning yourself to feel
Hmm.
more positive. I mean that's such like a hoity-toity thing to say, but it's I don't know, right? Because to me, I just want to write about things that why write about my fears when we can write about our hopes, right?
Hmm.
And have the fears that we have be in opposition to those to the hopes, right? And then we can
Hmm.
create a really compelling story that way, you know.
Is that what you hope that people take from it? That sentiment?
I think so. I mean, one of the things that Pete and I really discussed a lot is that I think The Rockefellers is a book that perhaps if you were 10 years old and you read it, you will get a different experience, right? And then maybe
Hmm.
in a few years, once you're in a different stage in your life, maybe you'll come back to it and read it, and it's a completely different experience,
Mhm.
right? Because it's such a multi-generational book that I think it allows multiple reads. I think that gives people a different experience each time. I mean, that's certainly the hope, you
Mhm.
know. Obviously, it's all about the execution, right? I can tell you what our intent is, but ultimately the readers and you guys, you'll decide whether that is if whether those sentiments come across, right?
Mhm.
But I just know that most of the time, I think with a lot of the books that we do at Ghost Machine, you'll see that a lot of the books really align with some of the personalities of the creators, right? And I think the writers and the artists are able to write with such passion because I think it's coming through the work because
Mhm.
it's something that is very topical to everybody. You know what I mean? And it's we're putting a lot of who we are into the books, and I
Mhm.
think it's whether they I guess connect with the fans or they don't. I think it's hard to say that they wouldn't connect because there's a peg for every hole, right? It's
Mhm.
you may be a circle trying to fit into a square, and I think with our books,
Mhm.
there's gonna be squares and there's gonna be
Mhm.
circles, right? And there's gonna be something that is a right fit for you. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is I think a lot of the books really show a lot of passion and a lot of pride of ownership, because
Mhm.
the way the company is structured, we own everything together. It's like seeing somebody who is cleaning the gutters and mowing the lawn and keeping things meticulous, right? Because it's a reflection of their ownership, and it's a reflection of who we are as creators.
Mhm. Is that freeing to be able to work in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you know in whenever you're in the creator owned environment, there's obviously in the past, and even at DC, there's always like this sense of competition, right? Like, oh, if I
Mhm.
get this book, it means this is the pecking order of the company,
Mhm.
right? If I get this book, I do that book, right?
Mhm.
With us, all of the books that we worked on are stuff that we've chosen to pursue, right?
Mhm.
Each book that we're working on was not something we were assigned to. It was something that we chose to do, right? So the
Mhm.
things that make up what Ghost Machine is, the nucleus of it, are made up of each of our personalities, and you see it reflected in the stories that we're choosing to put out there, right?
Mhm.
And by us owning everything together, we succeed together, we fail together, right? There's no, oh, this book is selling more than this book or that book. Doesn't matter, because
Mhm.
when Rook succeeds, we succeed, or when Geiger succeeds, we succeed, right? And
Mhm.
it's kind of the same thing, right? It's it just changes the dynamics of everything, right? And I think that's been one of the more innovative aspect of how we form the company, is making it so that you feel that sentiment. There's not a lot of places that do that, because most of the time we all think individually, because we
Mhm.
all are looking at our individual success and saying, in order to get this, I need to beat this and I need to beat that. You
Mhm.
know, we don't need to beat anybody, right? I mean, we just need to put out the best books that we can, because ultimately, the success that we have, we get to experience together.
Does that make you feel like you wanna kinda hop around and try different things out? Because, like, they have the 4 kind of different, like,
Mhm.
universes right now. Like, can you see yourself hopping around or wanting to go back to the dark after this or alongside it, or
We do covers for each other's books, so
Mhm.
we have that momentary visits. The thing is that with the Rockefellers being a science fiction book,
Yeah.
I don't feel the need to hop around, because if I ever felt like a moment of darkness needs to come in, we could introduce that
Mhm.
within the storyline, right? Because
Mhm.
in the same way that not every timeline in your life as a family is going to be bright and it's going to be hopeful. There's going to be moments of darkness. There's going to be moments of hopelessness, and there's going to be moments of loss, right? And
Mhm.
I think all of us are really able to, even a story like Geiger, like they're in a dystopian future, and yet, you see glimpses of 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 humanity coming in through how he interacts with people,
Hmm.
like he doesn't want to be around them, but he's compelled to save them, right? There's also the common ground that all of our books seem to have pets in them,
Yeah.
right? You know, so there's always all of our books, I think, have the ability to really encompass the different things, because one of our goals is to really do the books for as long as we can. Like we
Hmm.
were recently in New York, and in the summit, we started looking at marching towards issue 50 on these books.
That's
And
really
that
exciting.
seems, yeah, and that seems like such a high number, but if you look at it in years, that's only 5 to 6 years away.
Hmm.
That's not very long from now, right? So we're really looking at things from a long term. And I was telling Peter that it's kind of like manga, right? Like,
Hmm.
how long are these books are going to go? I don't know. They're all ongoing books, and the goal is to really tell the story for how long we feel it needs to go, right? And I think that's one of the creative freedom that we all get to experience, right? Is that at DC, when you're working on iconic characters, there's this sense of spinning your wheels in place, right?
Mm.
There's this perception of change and evolution in the character, but ultimately you put all the pieces back together where it started when you picked it up, so that way the next person coming in,
Hmm.
the characters are always recognizable, right? From day one to day 1000, that character is the same, right? And with our books, you know people don't work that way. At least
Hmm.
I'd like to think so, that who you are from day one to day 1000 is going to be a completely different person, right?
Hmm.
And I the core beliefs of those characters are there, and I think that's what excites us about telling these stories in a long way, because we know that there's these massive character growths that they're all going to experience, and we get to do that with them. I think that's what's exciting about it. It feels like we just got uh engaged with these characters,
Yeah.
and we're about to go on this journey together. And and there's no sentiment of, like, when you're at DC, okay, I'm going to work in the Flash. This means that as I rise up in the ranks, at some point I'm going to be able to ask for for a Batman book.
Hmm.
That's like a foregone conclusion. Then after that, I want to work on a crossover book, right?
Hmm.
And check, right? You do all those things, right? But here, the milestones we're looking at is the milestones in the lives of the characters, of where it's going to go, right?
Hmm.
Because each of those milestones um, will really reorient the story of the books, and show a different light, and show a different sentiment, going from light to dark and then back to light, or whatever, right?
Hmm.
We have the ability to really explore within our own little pockets, right?
Hmm. How have you found the reception of the public to Ghost Machine and what you're doing?
You know what? It's been incredible. I think one of the things that's been surprising is, all our books have been selling out.
Hmm.
Every single one has gone into second printing, third printing, or fourth printing, right? So what's really fascinating to see is that people are reading them. They're
Hmm.
not just picking it up, speculating that these are the hot properties, that hot IPs, or this. They're really invested in the characters, right? I mean, that's why the titles of the book are named after the characters. It really, we're trying to make the characters as iconic as we can. And and I think the readers and the retailers have responded very positively. I think that, in a market where I I think there's a sense of conservativeness when
Hmm.
ordering new properties, because it's as retailers, I think it can be difficult to take risks on new books versus buying something that will sell for sure. I think a lot of retailers are understanding and supporting us in our belief that, while the superhero books are there, they really ensure a strong customer base for the stores. I think what we're doing with our books is allowing an opportunity to get new readers in at the ground floor of something, right?
Hmm.
Because in the same way that, I remember I picked up when I first picked up the Flash, it was with Wally West. So that was my
Yeah.
Flash, that was my character, right? And I think it's kind of it's like people that pick up on music, right? They don't want to listen to their parents' bands at
Yeah.
some point. They want to listen to the new band, or at least if they listen to their parents' band, it's like it's because they're going for that retro
Yeah.
vintage vibes, right? And I think with our books, I think it really gives everybody an opportunity to get in on the ground floor, right? So we're hoping that the readers who are picking them up are readers who, you know, at whatever age group they're in, they're gonna either be hopefully lapsed readers who have gotten bored perhaps of superheroes, or maybe new readers that are coming from the YA generation or from the manga generation, who's hopefully looking at North American comics and
Hmm.
seeing a different perspective and different genres than superheroes, right?
Hmm.
So I think, you know I think it's been, when we were in New York, when we were looking at our projections, we were extremely grateful at how much the reception has been surpassing what our expectations were, you know,
Hmm.
and it's been great, so thank you to all the fans and the retailers who supported our book and continue to support our book. And it's going to be an interesting ride to see what the next 5-10 years will be like for us. So
I think people are definitely responding to the passion that you can feel coming from all the books because they are so aligned with all of the creators. And I do think, like you were saying, that really does come through. And I definitely think that there is an excitement in general in the air, like surrounding the comic scene and all these new things and seeing all the different genres that have always been there, but seeing some of them kind of get to come out to the fore again has also been an exciting thing. And I think that when people get the chance to check it out, and it's coming out November 20th, I think that they will really enjoy it. And I hope that everybody gives it a chance because it's a really fun book. So thank you so much for taking some
yeah,
time out of your busy schedule
yeah,
to come and chat about it a little bit. And yes, is there anything else you want to tell the people? And of course, I'll link all of your stuff down below as well.
yeah. No, my pleasure. I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for your enthusiasm in our books and your enthusiasm in comics, and spreading the positive vibes of these stories in this industry that we all love. So thank you. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thanks so much to everyone who made it to the end. And thanks to Francis for stopping by to chat about the Rocketfellers, which please do take the time to check out. It's very fun. Also, I've linked Francis's YouTube channel down below and check that out too. It's very interesting. As always, let me know all of your thoughts, and I will be back again with more videos very soon. See you then.